I had a client, his testosterone level was like 700 total, but his free level was like 6. He's not absorbing any. Even though he had a high total testosterone, your average practitioner would say, hey, you do not need testosterone. Be it that his free level was so low, he still qualified for testosterone. If you want to have kids in your future, do not go on testosterone. Without question, without doubt, like you know that you have to be a dad. It's not worth risking that. Like that's an extremely important part of your life and your family and like your future. It's not worth it. But as you sit there as a man and you're listening to this, you're thinking like, okay, I want to raise my testosterone levels. What is the category I should consider doing? Should I boost my levels or should I just go ahead and bucket and replace them? Welcome to the ManLab, where we combine science and health in the pursuit of making men great again.
This is how legends are born. This is how legends are born.
Hey guys, welcome back to the ManLab. Today we're going to be covering testosterone replacement therapy and testosterone boosting therapy so that you can find out as much information as possible to determine which is best for you, if it is even either of them. And if it isn't either of them, there will be other options you can take, and we will cover that as well today. Now, before we go into the podcast, I do want to mention T-Clinics USA is offering 10% off the ManLab listeners' first packages that they purchase through T-Clinics USA. To make mention of that, just head to bit.ly/T-Clinics USA. If you don't want to remember that, the link is in the description of wherever you are watching or listening to this. When you get to the contact page, mention the ManLab and you will receive 10% off that first package. So before we get into all the ins and outs of it, can we just go through what testosterone boosting therapy is and testosterone replacement therapy is for a bit of background?
Yeah, sure. So, for starters, both of them are going to be for guys that are looking at, increasing their testosterone levels. So of course, at our clinics, we're going to assess that by symptoms or we're going to assess it by blood tests. So if you determine that you have the need to want to have a higher testosterone level for whatever reason, whether that be increasing lean muscle mass or increasing libido or increasing energy or all the above, obviously we're going to start by doing some blood tests to determine like really where your baseline numbers are in relationship to like where they could be. And part of our blood test and good clinics should be is checking for things to determine why that level's low, not just that is low. So one thing that, we've talked about in the past, but for those who've never heard it, there's a difference between the idea that you can replace your testosterone, which is what TRT means, like testosterone replacement therapy, which truly is replacing what the body's not producing it, or if you're able to boost your levels, which means kind of turning the volume up on your own natural production. And so, of course, there's the minimal way to do this, which is like an over-the-counter supplement, which like things like Nugenix or Tribulus.
Tangata Ali, Fedoja agrestis, Sinache Tribulus. But those are, obviously you're in hopes to boost.
So like lots of supplements, pro-hormones and stuff. That's kind of like step number one. And then there's the medical type of version, which is what we offer and here we're to talk about today. And then there's the kind of final step, which is like the final boss in the testosterone world, which is going on testosterone replacement. So the difference is as I sit here today as a man, well, not necessarily me anymore, but you, okay. So
identify
as you sit, I still identify as a man, but I've already kind of bit the bullet and I'm on phase 3. But as you sit there as a man and you're listening to this and you're like thinking like, okay, I want to raise my testosterone levels. What is the category I should consider doing? Should I boost my levels or should I just go ahead and fuck it and replace them? And that's what we're going to get into today.
Perfect. So for step 1, blood work is a very important thing. When someone is getting their blood work, or at least with T-Clinics USA, what do you guys look for? What are indications? And what should the men and women watching this, or mostly men, what should they be making sure that their provider is looking for?
So, and we talked about this before. A lot of clinics I've seen over the years just pull just a testosterone total. We'll go testosterone total, see how much is in the system. More importantly, free testosterone will tell us how you're feeling, how you could have a good high total testosterone level and a low free and feel like crap. So we'll look at free. FSHLA tells us what the testes are doing. Are they firing? They functioning? Why? Is there a reason like maybe the pituitary is not talking to the boys and telling them to put out tests? So we'll be able to see, what is it, a primary or secondary deficiency, estrogen or estradiol. A lot of times when we first start, we'll check prolactin too, just depending on certain situations that could be causing a low testosterone. And then also, prolactin, I've seen a lot of guys, they don't ever really check it. And sometimes like if there's a benign pituitary tumor, which is not common, but we've had some over the years that have come through, just making sure like there's nothing there, because when you get into some of the other things like growth hormone peptides, you got to be very careful with those clients. So we'll check prolactin, make sure it's maybe not a shutdown. The pituitary is not talking to the testes because of a tumor.
Yeah, so I mean, keep in mind this: like the
sorry.
testicles are not just sitting there producing testosterone all the time, right?
Yeah.
So they're a factory that produces something, but there has to be something telling them to do it periodically, or as often, or to the volume that they should. That signal from brain to balls is FSH and LH, like luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. These two different hormones are the conversation that the brain has with the testicles that says, hey guys, get to work, make more testosterone. So part of your blood test in determining if boosting is an option, first off, we determine, like what Jeff said, is your total testosterone level low enough to warrant the need of testosterone? Then, like he said, free testosterone is how much is actually being absorbed at the receptor site. Now, if that level is deemed low, then we have to look at the FSH and LH levels to see if it too is low. So if it's low, then that means that by turning up the volume on those levels or mimicking those levels is what the medications that we offer, do. You're basically creating that signal that the brain is not. And yet the testicles then can respond to the signal by saying, oh shit, I'm being told to do something. Let me get to work and make that testosterone. And thus the boosting therapy opportunity is there. On the contrary, you have men out there with like low testosterone levels and higher FSH, LH levels, which means that even though the brain's attempting to tell the testicles to do their job, the testes are kind of out of gas and they're just not able to do their job. So those guys have a very low probability of boosting in comparison. And so part of like your assessment is, where is that signal hormone at in comparison to like, whether it's at the low range or high range. And if it's at the low range, you have a better chance of being boosted. If it's at the high range, you're probably not going to be boosted because you're already getting the signal that the medications we can provide would be mimicking.
So what's the major problem with just checking your total testosterone levels?
I mean, first off, like by just testing that, you're not really understanding like ultimately how high of an absorption rate you're getting. So what is potentially getting in the way? Is it the aromatase, meaning is it aromatizing into estrogen? Is it converting into dihydrotestosterone and not really like absorbing at the free level as much? Is there a higher sex binding globulin hormone which is causing that inability for it to absorb? Is it the estrogen or is it other stuff? So checking just total level, you're assessing what's in the bloodstream, but you're not assessing what's hitting the receptor site and actually doing the job that like testosterone is intended to do. So that's not really a determining factor so much on this choice of TBT versus TRT, but it is a determining factor of like how much testosterone is needed. And I'll give you an example. I had a guy who his testosterone level was like 700 total, but his free level was like 6 or 7, which was like less than 1%. So even though he had a lot of testosterone, he's not absorbing any. Like he's very, very little comparably, where, guys that are on testosterone could be in the 23, 25, 30 range-ish. And so
lab test, by the way, there's a range.
Right. Yeah, and those numbers are nanogram per deciliter, I believe.
So you got guys calling me like, whoa.
What was that? Because depending on Quest or LabCorp, you want to look at your assessment, but it's a percentage ultimately. Anyway, long and short is, even though he had a high total testosterone, your average practitioner would say, hey, you do not need testosterone, be it that his free level was so low and his estradiol level wasn't really that high and his growth hormone levels were moderately normal, he still qualified for testosterone because his free level was just that low. And so he had all the symptoms of a guy who had a testosterone level of 200 or 300.
Find out if you may have low testosterone for free with the ADAM test. Now, sometimes it's a little bit nerve-wracking to go into a clinic to get a full blood panel to find out your hormone levels. And sometimes you might just want to sort of kick the tires just a little bit. If you are that person, the Adam test is for you. All it is a couple of questions that are completely non-intrusive, non-invasive, that will help give an indication to you whether you may or may not have low testosterone. And the best part is the Adam test is accurate up to 88% of the time. So for something as simple as a questionnaire, that is a very high number. Now, if you want to make use of that, you can do it online right now. It takes less than 30 seconds to fill out, and it is at bit.ly/free Adam test. That's free ADAM test. Now, if you don't want to remember that, the link is in the description of wherever you're listening or watching this podcast. And then after you've filled out the questionnaire, you will now have a better idea of whether you may or may not have low testosterone, and if you need to take the next step, which is a detailed blood panel with a clinic such as T Clinics USA. So again, to make use of that, go to bit.ly/free Adam test, and let's continue to making men great again. Let's get back to the show.
Just for anyone who's not familiar with it, can we go through the difference between free testosterone and total testosterone just to give the understanding of it?
I mean, just again, it's what's being absorbed. Just think about the body, right? Like we have parking spots, if you will, that are throughout the whole bloodstream that are basically receptor sites. And this testosterone molecule that call it the size of a car can only park in those parking spots. If the receptor sites are clogged or not accessible, then the testosterone molecule doesn't get a chance to park and do its job, and it continues to drive around looking for what it needs to look for, which is the place for it to do its job. If estradiol is parked in the parking spot, or if the sex-binding globin hormone is attached to the vehicle, preventing it from fitting in the parking spot, or if the albumin is too high, preventing it from absorbing in the parking spot, you continue to run into these testosterone deficiency symptoms. Because although testosterone is driving around, it is not getting to where it needs to get to make the impact. And so what that difference is total testosterone is just what's in your bloodstream, but it ain't doing shit. Free testosterone is the testosterone that's found its way to the receptor site and is making that impact in what we know to be the benefit of testosterone therapy: sex drive, muscle tone, energy, libido, all those type of things. That's because that testosterone's absorbed in the receptor site accordingly.
Okay. And the other one that I wanted to touch before we get into the boosting therapies is I always fuck this one up.
Sex hormone binding.
I always jump to binding.
SHBG.
SHBG.
Yep.
That's an important component when it comes into considering which one to choose. Can we just run through what that is and how that affects our hormones? I
don't want to say it's so important in your making decision between boosting or TRT. It's important to assess that to know, can you potentially reduce that if it's extremely high. And there are drugs like Anavar, which is an anabolic steroid that actually kind of helps to reduce SHBG. There's Tongkat Ali, which that can help that. There are some dietary changes, and of course, increasing human growth hormone does that too, like we spoke about in these peptide channels. But think about it this way, like it's essentially a protein that attaches to the testosterone molecule. Like I said just a second ago, that analogy. This testosterone is a molecule that has a certain size and a certain shape. There's a receptor site that is a particular size and a particular shape. That testosterone molecule kind of drives around and looks for that receptor site that fits it, that it can fit into that spot. This binding globin hormone that is what SHBG, or not really hormone, but protein, kind of attaches itself to that testosterone molecule and prevents it from getting to where it needs to get to. And I feel like, and I don't know this, so somebody may correct me on this one, but as we get older and we're taking testosterone, or we continue to have higher testosterone levels, we're more susceptible to testosterone-based side effects. Things like prostate enlargement and polycythemia and elevated blood pressure and losing our hair, and some of the good parts too, like having that extra energy and that increased libido. I mean, let's be honest, like you're not supposed to be having kids when you're 6 years old. You're not supposed to live forever like we want to do as men. We're not supposed to be like out there having high libidos and having sex into our 60s and 70s. So if the body sees that there's a lot of testosterone in the system, it can't stop you from taking it. So it responds by producing this kind of protective protein and says, chill out this dude's, testosterone benefit, if you will, and stop him from being so horny and active, and it kind of attaches itself to that testosterone molecule, and so if we can reduce that protein, then we can allow the testosterone that's present to do its job better. But that's not so easy.
Well,
like it doesn't just go away.
Well, and a lot of times it could happen with dosing. Sometimes pushing somebody to a higher limit when they're older, you see a lot more of that. So you have to mitigate or adjust it. Maybe it's a multiple shot per week, cutting them back so they're not getting these high spikes to where they get the byproduct, the estradiol or the sex hormone binding globulin, where it's binding to it. You want to be able to, the goal is, I would say, like, easy way to understand testosterone is how much in the system. Free is how much is unbound available that I could use. The higher the free, the better you feel, the better sex drive, more energy, mental clarity, all the stuff you're looking for from testosterone.
Yeah, I mean, we hear it a lot. Like, you get these guys that are come to us like they're 45, 50 years old, and they're like out the gate, they're like, shit, man, my sex drive is great, and I feel good, and I notice a lot of muscle mass, and they're on the same dose, right? And then, they're clients of ours for many, many years, and now you talk to them and they're in mid-50s, like, man, I just don't feel like it's doing as much anymore. Like, I don't know if the stuff I got now isn't as good as what it was, and you do their blood work and their testosterone level is still the same. But over the years, like, again, they've been exposed to these high levels for long periods of time. The body's starting to kind of protect itself from like having these elevated levels. And then we check their SHBG levels, and they are now a lot higher, And so then totally different conversation, like, what can we do to lower that down so that they don't have to chase the dragon and take more and more testosterone to get the more benefit? Because now you're opening the door to more side effect issues, more red blood cell development, more potential prostate problems, more potential hair loss. So, like, we don't want to just keep increasing testosterone in order to increase the benefits. We want to look at maybe reducing some of those, like, things that are inhibiting the testosterone effects. And then, like I said, that's usually like the points the finger towards a peptide or, some other benefit that, you really allow that testosterone to absorb better.
It's a balancing act.
Yeah.
It's like getting everything in line and homeostatic so you mitigate the byproduct.
Gotcha. And so going into testosterone boosting therapies, what are some of the therapies, before we get into who's probably best to look at it, let's look at what are some of the therapies medically that you guys have available and what they do.
So there's the most common one, the one that we use absolutely the most because it's most effective, most affordable, least side effects, is a drug called enclomiphene.
And kind of go back to like in years past, prior to enclomiphene, which is a relatively newer medication or use, would be Clomid.
Yeah, clomiphene citrate was a drug that was used many, many years ago, which is actually a fertility drug. But clomiphene has kind of two isomers that make it up, which is N-clomiphene and zuclomiphene, I believe. And the problem with taking traditional clomiphene is that it has side effects, depression issues. It even causes vision problems because, like, you have estrogen receptor sites in the eyes that it attaches itself to, and people get blurred vision. It also has like a negative feedback over time to where it stops working as long. So Clomid was never really designed to be a long-term therapeutic testosterone booster. It was more for fertility, coming off therapy, as a kind of a rebound drug, when you're coming off a steroid use or testosterone use. And so, of course, they started realizing that if they split this compound, which was clomiphene, into two parts and got rid of the zuclomiphene isomer and just isolated the N-clomiphene, it was a lot better at long-term use. Mm-hmm. So that drug is relatively new. We've only been offering it probably 3 years-ish, maybe.
2 years, yeah.
And it's great. I mean, it has very low aromatization. It stimulates the testicles to produce an abundance amount of testosterone comparably. And guys can be on it for years, years and years and years. Continue to get the benefits.
Testes get the signal, right?
Yeah.
So that's the variable.
So is there like a duration of time that like you could, to at least what they've seen so far, it's like an indefinite or at least like a long-term thing, or is it sort of like a put it in the system, boost it, come back off it?
I don't think there's an answer that's correct to that question. There are guys that have the ability for many, many years to get a result out of it. And then there's guys that are kind of towards the end of their life of their testicles' ability to produce.
The juice is almost gone.
Yeah. And I don't know, like, I'm sure there's probably, it's like anything else. I mean, the testes have a life to them, and at some point you're going to exhaust them. can boosting them. I mean, there's guys that are in their 70s that have amazing testosterone levels, you know, and there's guys in their 30s that have shitty testosterone levels. So I think like you're only boosting the ability of each guy's testicles to max out the ability that they're willing to do until they're not.
Yeah.
And you know, that's why we do follow blood works, but we also assess like symptoms, you know, because like, why are you doing this to begin with? You know, you came to us with some symptom that you're trying to improve, and you start noticing, okay, like it's improved now.
What are the symptoms that people typically feel like they're low on testosterone?
You know, like there's the typical ones that you would just think right out the gate, like ED problems, lack of sex drive, lack of libido. Then there's guys that are going to the gym and noticing, you know, they're not having gains anymore, or they're putting on fat, or they're sleepy in the middle of the day. And, you know, there's, for the most part, and this is just kind of goes with all therapies, I think, across the board, you usually see relief out the gate because you're coming from a low, we get you to a high, you're like, holy shit, I feel better, I look better, my drive is back up, I'm having no problems in the bedroom. And then it kind of tempers down a little bit. And I think part of that is you get used to this new high level that you are. And so like, you know, not only do you get used to the effects of the new high that like kind of you're at, but also your body starts to do those kind of protective pump the brakes on you.
Is it sort of like getting onto the highway? Like you feel it when you go from
exactly.
Well, I would say it's like the honeymoon.
But then once you're hitting 70, you're like,
there.
we're not even moving.
It's kind of like the honeymoon phase. You know, everyone remembers the climb. They remember the punch in the gas and accelerating, and things are good, and oh my God, and then like things level out. And then it becomes your new norm. And so it's funny, I can't tell you for how long we've been doing this. Like you get guys call after like month 4 or 5, they're like, hey man, like,
it's not working
I don't think it's working anymore. And I'm like, well, I was
Get
like,
off it
he's like, no, they're like, I think I'm going to come off. And I'm like, don't recommend that.
Really gonna feel like
I was like, and they're like, well, I'm going to try. I'm like, okay, I'll talk to you in 3 weeks. They'll call back at 2, like, yo.
like your analogy of getting on the highway is my analogy is usually about like starting to make money with, you know, when you first start making whatever it is you make in life, money wise.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I got a lot of money. You know, like let's go buy some new stuff and I can finally afford that watch or that car or that thing that I've been wanting. But then after a while, like you're used to making that amount of money and it's not that like interesting and fun to you anymore. So then you get kind of like complacent with it. You either want to make more, you know, or you just get used to the amount you have. And one of the two factors kind of is similar in the testosterone world is like, you can't keep climbing. You can't keep adding more. At least in the boosting category, would the add more here would be the testosterone replacement, which we're going to get into, that step between one and the next. But it just goes across the board, is like all those things that you seeked out to be improved, out of the gate, you see this reaction. You're like, shit, my sex drive is back. I'm putting on muscle mass. I put up, 20% stronger, bench press. But then you get used to that, and then you're like wanting it to be greater, and you want it to be more, you want it to be stronger, and you're like, at some point we have to be the sobering voices to say, this is about as good as it's going to get.
Going from 1 scoop of pre-workout to 2.
You can't just take 4. At some point,
but I'll tell you, it's so common though. I think at that, like I always say, it's that 4 to 6 month mark. After they kind of get leveled off. A lot of places, I see it so often. It's like the client goes in, I don't feel as good or whatever, so they up the dose. And it creates more problems, more byproduct. Whereas like a lot of times we'll get guys come in and they're like, hey, I was going over here and like it was fine for the first 4 months and I'm not feeling as good now. And then we'll go ahead and like adjust the dose down or get things back in line. And so, I always say just wherever you go, make sure it's not just very cookie cutter basic, because that's where like therapy could either stay good or go south really quick.
Yeah.
So enclomiphene was one, but you asked me a question like, what are the therapies? There's 2 other medications. One is human chorionic gonadotropin, which is HCG, which is arguably the best one in the category, but unfortunately it's the most expensive. Years ago, you could get compounded HCG for very inexpensive, and it was readily available. It was right around, I think, like 2019 or so, maybe 2020, like right around the pandemic beginning. HCG became a thing of the past. It became something that the compound pharmacies were not allowed to make anymore. And then all of a sudden, you could only buy the big pharmaceutical,
So it's
brand
not like
stuff.
a conspiracy thing.
Well, no,
situation, like,
there was class.
like
It
a
was in
cramp.
legislation for almost 10 years to
They
be
just
placed as
decided
a
to start-
biologic.
yeah, they just
So-
decided to start. You
And
know,
they finally went through and enforced it. It was like
Anything that makes us healthy is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, there was a thing was like, were they trying to inhibit guys from being able to boost their testosterone and maintain
kids.
fertility? You know, if you subscribe to the conspiracy side of it, but like Jeff said, it had always been placed in what was called the biologic category. And
What's a biologic for people unaware?
so biologics are just amino acids that are over 99 chains long, where peptides were up to 40, I believe, 40 and below.
And what's the problem with that?
Well, you need a biologic license to produce a biologic.
which is
Got you.
pretty
So
darn
compound
expensive.
pharmacies, they can't produce biologics by law because they would need a license to produce
For example,
them.
like
So
growth hormone, insulin, growth hormone,
HGH,
HGH,
testosterone's even in that
testosterone,
category.
yeah.
Testosterone's a weird one. I don't know. There
Is that used to boost as well? Testosterone?
no, testosterone is
sorry,
just a
that's-
growth hormone peptide,
that's
but
it, yeah.
They
for
cla-
some reason, it's
I think what
classified, but they
happened
still
is
make
back
them.
when they came to the market, it was a grifta, and it was going to go toe to toe with like big pharma growth
Right.
hormone, and so they kept it in that class of biologics, even though it's a GHRH.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really part of today's conversation, but
Yeah,
but it's just
That's a whole nother
what we're
topic.
getting into. Like human growth hormone, I'm sorry, HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin. It was widely being used in the weight loss industry, and then it was widely being used in our business for testosterone boosting. When in fact, in reality, it's a fertility drug. And so if you have a wife who's attempting to get pregnant, she's going to be prescribed HCG and lots of it. And guys who are having, actually for young kids who are trying to go through puberty, it was prescribed.
Get the balls.
And also for men who are trying to get fertile, it was prescribed.
It didn't work for me.
Yeah. And so what was happening is, like, when all that happened, you know, when they took it off of the compound list, and then the big pharma, you know, Preglan and these drugs were kind of the only ones that could produce it. The fertility clinics got priority. And meanwhile, these other companies couldn't ramp up their production. And unlike other drugs that run into shortage, compound pharmacies should be able to step in and make it. But now they were said, no, you can't, because you don't have the proper license to make it. So we saw this instantaneous, like, screeching halt to the availability. And it was like, okay, well, shit, this thing's gone. Now, HCG didn't come without its own fault too in the boosting world, because it only worked for like a long enough period of time where guys were using it, and all of a sudden over a few years are noticing not as much improvement. It had a higher aromatase property to it, so people were having more estrogen conversion, so we would have to deal with that too. And like I said, it just from a longevity standpoint, we couldn't get it, you know, at the time. Now since then, things have settled in a little bit, and the availability is a little bit more available, so we can get it more affordable now than we could before. It's about 50% more expensive to, you know, than enclomiphene you know, therapy is. And then there's a drug called gonadorelin, which was kind of a peptide version of what HCG kind of is, but not really. There were a lot of people when the whole like HCG thing happened, you know, we were scrambling for an option. Like, what else can we give to people that looked, felt, and smelled like it? It was a peptide. You reconstitute it, you shot it similar into your belly fat. It had the same concept and idea, but it just wasn't as effective. And I think after doing like more and more analysis, it had something to do with how short acting it was in the body. It only lasted for like 15 or 20 minutes. It has a nice combination with enclomiphene packaged though. And the reason being is that although the presence of it is short, the punch of it's kind of hard. So it had this kind of hard punch to the chest, like, hey, make some testosterone, stay alive. Like, don't die on me. It was almost like the defibrillator to the balls. You know, like, don't die on us here. Meanwhile, the enclomiphene's kind of like the guy doing the pushes and the breaths, right? And keeping them going, but like the defibrillator hit. Yeah. And so it was like, it did have its place. And we do still have guys to this day who still
Respond well to it.
responded decent to it. I don't think we're like, we don't promote it as much anymore because enclomiphene is such a superior product.
Way
you
better.
know,
So if two questions, if budget's not a problem, which would you choose?
HCG.
Okay, and what's the
Well,
best,
no, I would take
what's the best-
HCG and enclomiphene if budget wasn't a question. I would do them both together.
Okay.
Or personally, just so you know, I actually rotate because I noticed like after roughly 2 months. So sometimes I'll switch back and forth and just to stay sensitive because too with HCG, like you were saying, you start kind of.
But you're on testosterone,
but I'm not using it for boosting. I'm using it just to keep
that's
the
a
boys.
different conversation,
Keep
which
the
we'll
boys
get into.
Yeah.
Because that stops your balls from shrinking. that's the consequence of actually
still
being
gotta
on
achieve
exogenous
that.
But
testosterone.
he was going back for like boosting though. A lot of times the combo of the two works actually pretty amazing.
And if you're really interested in like dialing up your fertility, which, we're not really fertility specialists, but the medications we offer in the same family. So sometimes the consequence, good or bad, is increasing fertility in guys. And so we've had many men over the years get, their wives or girlfriends pregnant, whether they were shooting for that or not, under the...
Or we'd have guys that were on therapy. They didn't plan to have a kid. The wife, or they met some young girlfriend that they're going to have a kid with.
Right.
And they decide to, obviously try, and maybe their fertility or their semen analysis is low. And so a lot of times we'll have to kind of like help them come off. And so we could boost things back and make that a possibility.
Quickly, before we get back to the episode, please hit that subscribe button if you haven't on whatever channel you're watching or listening to the ManLab. And if you're listening on Spotify, if you could leave a 5-star review on the channel page, that would be greatly appreciated, because that will help continue to push it a little bit further for whoever is looking for information to help improve their health. Now, on the topic of information, if you are on YouTube, you can leave a comment below on this episode and we will respond to it with as much information as possible, or it might be another episode down the road. The reason this is important is because the more questions you guys ask, the more we know what we need to do to serve you guys better in future episodes. So comment on YouTube, leave a 5-star review, hit subscribe, and let's continue to help making men great again. Let's get back to the show.
So does boosting affect positively, negatively, or neutral fertility in men?
Positively. Absolutely.
All day long.
Absolutely. So be careful. Like if you're not wanting to get somebody pregnant and you're deciding to take enclomiphene, HCG, or gonadorone, you are 100% going to be more fertile. Now, if you're
Increase your pull-out game, basically.
yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, if you're shot, like, and you're spitting no semen out, and again, like I have currently my practitioner is working with a client, a good friend of mine who's 60 years old, and he married a 30-something-year-old girl, and
My man.
he wants to have
Boys.
She wants to have kids, and now he's going through the torturous, very difficult process of coming off testosterone after having been off for like 20 years. And he's just going through it, and he's feeling like shit and what else can I take? And of course, he's seeing a fertility specialist, and they have him on a protocol. We're supporting it with his testosterone boosting therapy. But the long and short is all of a sudden he's not magically fertile. Like he's really struggling, and he may never be. That's just
Take a lot of paddles to the balls.
Yeah, which goes back to the thing, just like kind of, boosting is only as good as your ball's ability to respond. By nature, these medications are benign. By nature, HCG, gonadorone, and enclomiphene don't have any effect on your body whatsoever besides their ability to tell your body to do something. Where testosterone is the thing. It is the molecule that's absorbed in the body and the receptor site that does the thing that it's supposed to do. HCG is not doing anything to your body. It's not making you feel a certain way. It's not making you grow more muscle or having higher sex drive. It is telling your balls, hey, make testosterone. And if in fact they do, then the libido goes up, then the muscle mass goes up. So like boosting, there's so many analogies, but like, let's just use jump starting a car. If you got a dead battery and we jump started with cables and that turns over, then boosting worked. But sometimes that battery's shot to shit and you can hit it as many times as you want with the cables. And if it doesn't turn on, you are no longer a candidate for boosting because the cables didn't work, right?
Yeah.
So that's...
Is there an age that's too young for taking boosted testosterone therapy?
I mean, we would never touch a guy under the age of 18.
I would never touch a guy under the age of 18.
But I feel like,
actually.
let's start with, again, like these medications, FDA approvals are actually for guys who have a difficult time going through puberty. There's a drug called kisspeptin, which it's got the name kisspeptin in the sense that it gives that kiss to the body to kind of stimulate the testicles a little kiss on the balls. Yeah. It's actually for the testes to drop. And it's actually produced naturally in your body at a certain age. It's that first stimulation to the testes to say time to drop and become a man, right?
Okay.
And so these medications are also similar in the idea that they can kind of like produce testosterone. I would be a little careful if you're just out there as a guy who's like, 18 years old and you're kind of looking for a more advantage in the sports arena or trying to get more muscular or trying to be a better football player and think, well, if I go on enclomiphene, this goes without risk.
Does that count as like a
PED? Yeah, of course.
Sports?
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
so-
All these, if you're a professional sports player.
Listen, the list now, they list everything.
You're not allowed to have your
you
balls
can't,
off
you
in
can't
sports.
take freaking
The
beta
reason being though,
blockers.
because like you're depending on the stimulation to get your levels to a point where they're satisfactory to you. So psychologically, if you ever come off, your levels are going to drop. And at some point you're over exhausting, the testes capabilities of producing the hormone. I do know of clinics that treat guys that are 18. I don't personally feel comfortable with it unless like that guy's really been determined to have hypogonadism and we've tested his LH thoroughly. And I say thoroughly, like meaning like 3 to 4 times randomly and continue to assess the fact that it's low. Cause like, you could do any blood work on any given day and your levels can be shitty. Maybe you got a bad night of sleep. Maybe you're getting off being sick. Maybe you're going through something, who knows? And you use this one blood test like, oh, look like my testosterone's low, my LH is low. Well, no, it was on that test. Like, let's come back in a week and do it again. Let's do it in the middle of a day again. Now, if we do 3 or 4 consistent tests and you're now at a point where it's like, all right, yeah, I'm a guy's 18, 19, and I got a very difficult time, with having sex drive or I have no erections. And, at that age, let's be honest, I think we were all just like, nothing but sex on your mind at 18, right? And if you're not at that point where, of course, when you're 18 years old and you're having no drive, no muscle tone, no athleticism, you're not growing hair under your arms, your balls or anything, you're looking for this option, and again, after multiple tests, we determine it. But see, like they should go through other tests to figure out why. Have you done an MRI on your pituitary to see if there's something else that's like inhibiting this? Have you done an MRI on your testicles to see if you have some kind of a growth, or is there testicular cancer issues? So things really need to be evaluated to determine why are you so abnormal.
Yeah.
And if you've really like checked all those boxes and you're still at a point where you're wanting to do this, my advice to a young guy would be maybe do this to get out of the weeds and then come off and then test yourself again. Like try to use it to get out of that hole and then try to come off and see if you're like fixed after maybe every 6 months and see like, kind of where you stand before, once you're past like 25, 30, 26-ish, I would say that comfortably you're going to do what you're going to do at that point. And if you're not in a good spot, then sure, at that point it's time to bite the bullet with this.
Who shouldn't take boosting therapy for testosterone?
I mean, it's a contraindication. Obviously, if someone had a benign, or just a pituitary tumor, they would have to rule that out before they did anything, whether it be TBT or TRT. But a lot of times, most of those guys, I've never seen one with a non.
I mean, any guy who shouldn't have high testosterone levels to begin with should not be on boosting or replacement. And those guys could be people who have like really strong family histories of prostate cancer, or previous history themselves of prostate cancer.
So prostate cancer is a risk?
Well, it's something that should be very deeply discussed between themselves and the practitioners. I want to say with caution, any person can be treated with anything, but I want to say like those people should have a higher level of risk. Who shouldn't be doing TBT are guys that have high LH levels and, testosterone levels that are indicative of not needing to be boosted. Right. Or a guy who has whatever FSH LH levels and his testosterone is 800.
You're rolling the dice.
Why fuck yourself up to make yourself just marginally better? That's also something.
There's other ways you could fill the gaps. That's where you get into like growth hormone peptides. You can get into some of the natural boosters.
I mean, your levels are great. Like I think you did your levels and they were like 800, 900, right?
Yeah, they're 980, but my free was like mid.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like great.
But to go on to a boosting peptide, like if it ain't broken, don't fix it. You're not broken. The risk isn't worth the reward. And not saying there isn't even risk, but like why potentially put yourself to throw your system off? Yeah. And like there's no guarantee that any situation that has low risk isn't going to be your risk. I feel like at any point the abnormal could become the normal for any one person. And again, like if you're sitting here thinking that you're the one person who will never get that risk, do not kid yourself. Like there is one guy out there that will fuck his body up, and he had good levels.
No,
He
I've
went
seen
on
it.
Enclomiphene,
I've had guys
and now
actually
he's-
transfer from other clinics, and they did like a boosting type protocol, and he had like a 900 level, and now he ran like 2 months, came off, and he was at like 400. And that's all he did.
So even taking boosting, there is a chance of
Yeah, because he had a really high output. His levels are great. Like if you would have came through, like don't touch that. Let's work on other things. Let's fill some, check some other
he
boxes.
was
That
good,
would
yeah.
It threw him off. And so
And then the question is why? Like you said, you asked the question, anybody who shouldn't be doing it, like, why are you doing this to begin with? Like if your testosterone levels are pretty damn good and yet you feel good and your sex drive is great and you're getting strong erections and you're pretty muscular and like you're not really interested in being strong.
You're rolling the dice.
What are you trying to get out of this? Like what is the purpose? Are you just trying to turn up what's already good to be a little bit better? And again, that really comes back down to, I think, the responsibility of the clinic you're going to. If they're just super money driven and they're just like, oh, you need this and let me make money from you by prescribing it to you, and like you're going to get 5% more out of life, I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like you really need to have symptoms to say to you, this is worth it, because I don't care what drug or peptide or thing exists out there. Nothing should be done with the idea that it's absolutely 100%, without risk and safe. Even if there's a minimal risk, like don't take that risk if it's not necessary. Because not to mention too, then you're shorting yourself of an opportunity down the line when you do need it to introduce something at that part of your life to like resolve that problem. If you're 30 years old, man, you got a long life ahead of you. Wait till you start to kind of come off that peak before this thing can bring you back onto it. Don't do it at your high and say, I want to see if I can get higher. Like at some point, I think you need to be reasonable with what your expectations are.
Yeah. Is there any, besides those issues you've just addressed, are there any other issues people should be aware of with testosterone boosting therapy?
You already
I
said,
mean,
like,
look,
prostate.
every issue that comes with taking testosterone comes with taking boosting. Increasing red blood cell development, increased blood pressure, increased hair loss.
I mean, the
prostate
chances
aggravation.
of a lot of that he's talking about is few and far between, just
But
because
they
you're not
exist.
getting these like super physiological numbers.
But they do exist.
but
I mean,
sometimes I've seen people bounce back really good, and they start noticing like their hair starts thinning, and PSA changes a little bit. So,
Yeah.
I would say it depends on the person. Just make sure you're monitoring everything and you're kind of being strategic in what you're doing.
Yeah. So if with testosterone replacement therapy, I think when people hear about testosterone in general, the replacement therapy is immediately what we think of. What is the right sort of candidate of man that should be looking into this instead of boosting therapy?
I feel like the number one thing is you have to be okay with the probability or risk of being infertile. If you want to have kids in your future, without question, without doubt, like that you have to be a dad. You have a wife who is absolutely hell-bent on you having children. Do not go on testosterone. It's not worth risking that. Like that's an extremely important part of your life and your family and like your future. It's not worth it. Even though there's ways for us to mitigate some of that risk, even though we could say that there's a probability by taking enclomiphene or HCG along with testosterone, you could still have children or still have a higher probability of it. Look, you are increasing the probability of infertility, and we haven't opened the door to this part of the conversation just yet, but I'll explain why that happens. But yeah, I mean, that's like an absolute thing that you should be aware of, is that you're not prepared for the risk of not having children.
So what is the reason, like, why testosterone replacement therapy creates such a high risk of infertility?
So let's just like break this out. So testosterone replacement, there's kind of multiple ways of doing it, like multiple forms of medication. You have oral pills, which is Kysotrex, and I almost don't want to put that into a TRT.
Right.
That's like a hybrid.
It's like a hybrid because
between
it's
the
not,
two.
you're not really replacing, you're kind of like supplementing. It's almost like a TST, like a testosterone supplement therapy.
TST sounds
Yeah, well, it's
something
not
you don't want to
STD.
catch.
And we'll drop back to Kysotrex in a moment, but injectable, pellets, topical, what you're doing is you're taking what your body naturally produces in a pharmaceutically created version. Like this is called exogenous format. This exogenous format is a recreated of the same hormone that your body naturally produces internally, which is called endogenous. So you introduce this exogenous hormone into your body to replace the endogenous production. And what happens is that the testicles over time figure out that somebody else took their job. Like this needle took its job. This pill took its job, or not pill in this case, but topical or pellet. And so, eventually the balls are like, if this testosterone's here and I don't need to do my job is to do two things: make testosterone and make sperm, semen. And I'm out. Like you want me to not work? Fuck it, I'm going on a break. And I'm going on a break from doing both.
They retire.
You can't just pick and choose. You can't just say, well, make healthy sperm and semen, but like I don't need you to make testosterone because now again, like you can utilize enclomiphene or HCG or gonadorone in some cases while using testosterone to keep the testicles somewhat alive. But again, you're like dramatically reducing their effectiveness. Kind of think about a light switch on, light switch off.
Yeah.
HCG and clomiphene is light switch on and testosterone is light switch off. The hand pushing the switch off is a hell of a lot stronger than the hand pushing the switch on. And so when I take that shot of testosterone on Monday and another one on Thursday, because I take mine 2 times a week, for 7 days straight, 24 hours a day, I have the exposure of very high testosterone levels, high enough to where my balls are like, I don't need to make testosterone apparently because this dude's levels are rocking. And so at no point are they told to like get back to work. They're just on like permanent break.
Yeah.
And that's why your balls shrink up. And that's why we know that testosterone's the culprit of having, small balls.
Nuviva Medical Weight Loss has helped over 50,000 men and women in Florida lose over 500,000 pounds in body fat. Now, there are wonder drugs out there like semaglutide and tirzepatide, but it's important that these tools are used properly and safely with the correct guidance, because that guidance is what will help you make sure that you're losing that unwanted body fat while keeping the lean muscle mass. Nuviva Medical Weight Loss has over 10 clinics statewide in Florida with expert coaches who are with you the entire way, helping you with any habit adjustment, large or small. The secret behind Nuviva's continual success with their clients is their in-office expert experience. You will speak directly with a support coach, and if you have any questions, you will get immediate answers. If you are struggling, you will get immediate adjustments or pivots that will keep you on track with your goals. And what's great is you can choose the route of your weight loss goals. So if you just want to take diet adjustments and some supplements, you can do it. However, if you want to go a little bit of a stronger, faster approach and use semaglutide or tirzepatide, the Nuviva expert coaches can also help you along the way with that as well. So if you have a lot of pounds to lose or even just a few pounds and you know that having some support with an expert coach will get you there faster, contact Nuviva at either nuvivaweightloss.com or send them a message on Instagram at Nuviva Weight Loss and mention the ManLab for a little perk. That is Nuviva, Nuviva weightloss.com or at Nuviva Weight Loss on Instagram. So hit up Nuviva, get an expert coach, get that support you want, and let's get you feeling amazing again and lighter again. Let's get back to the show.
Have you ever heard of a guy like planning ahead, like he wants to get on testosterone replacement therapy, but then still wants to have kids, so maybe
Freeze
he's
it.
like,
We do.
shooting a cup.
Yeah, we tell them all the time.
No, we
Really?
have, I just had a guy recently.
Shot in a cup?
He was younger. We TBT'd. He boosted okay a couple different times. Eventually, it was going to where he was. He's having a lot of the symptoms. And so he wants to keep that option open, but he doesn't feel good enough. So he's going to go on testosterone. So he obviously did a semen analysis. He's going to bank some or cryopreserve some.
ferociously
and
joking
then
for a
go
week
on.
or
But I'll
something.
tell you, let me use this as a disclaimer,
though?
though. You have guys that just because you're on testosterone, though, don't think that you're the boys aren't working or there isn't, because I see many guys think that like, I'm
fertile.
chemically castrated.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden
Whoops.
they're still having kids. Like you get some guys that go on testosterone, they don't skip a beat. The
couple of soldiers
testes
storm the beach by
Well, they're
accident.
not like sometimes the balls don't atrophy as much. Some function stays there.
Maybe they got a side girlfriend and all of a sudden knock on the door.
But I can tell you over the years, just being in this space, I've seen guys take something as simple as a pro hormone and be shut down indefinitely. And then I've seen guys go on testosterone or abuse steroids and still have kids through the process.
I mean,
So-
listen, I'm 45. I've been married for 22 years. My wife and I decided at the beginning of our marriage, we didn't want children. If I know what I know now, and if anybody's listening to this who you're young, you're married, you want to have children, go freeze your sperm today. You do not know what your future is. You could take something, medication, you can get in a car accident, something can happen to you. It's not an expensive therapy. It's not expensive to freeze your sperm. It really is not.
Really?
Go bank it.
Like
put it in.
$5.99 a month or something?
I don't know what the cost
No,
is,
not
but
that
there's a
much.
lot of places that you can actually do
I
it
was
online with.
$5.99.
Oh yeah.
Like it's just an insurance policy. You know, like, you know, not that there's anything wrong with adopting.
I'm always just spooked that someone's going to come and steal my cups. And then all of a sudden, it's like, drink it. Golly.
but I mean, look, like, what's
you're
your-
gonna run into some Blakes at some point. You're like,
Yeah.
Let's hope you never have to use it. You know, let's really hope you don't.
Yeah.
But if you're that one person who now later on in your life you find yourself in a predicament, maybe your current wife has said, I don't want children. But what if you guys get divorced? And what if the next wife absolutely wants it? What if you have a change of life, you know, or something happens in your life where you have some, you know,
Epiphany.
profound epiphany and all of a sudden you do want children. You do not know your future. Why not have an insurance policy? It just seems so logical if that technology exists and like you could get in a car accident, you become paralyzed, you could take a medication. I mean, so much shit happens that you do not know what to plan for in your life. You could be exposed to radiation. Even these fucking vaccines that people are taking are causing all sorts of infertility problems. It's just stupid not to do it. Like if you know you want to have kids, go fucking say, you know, do the sperm. Like
read
you,
some
I know you want more
magazines.
children. It would be in your best interest. Like, it's an insurance policy.
Yeah, I'm
put some
creating
away.
a basketball team right now.
Just, you know, it gives you a reason to like then be okay. Like I know the worst case scenario, I'm still able to have this thing that I know that me and my family are going to want. So I think you're silly. There's online companies you could literally Google.
Fellow.
They send you a kit. Yeah, Fellow. They send you a kit. You jerk into a cup. You ship it back to them. They freeze it. And again, worst
Ship
case,
it? Man, imagine USPSing that.
worst case scenario, like, you know, you have to use it. It's there.
I mean, I wish, you know, looking back, because I took, you know, anabolic steroids through in high school and college. And then, you know, my wife and I got married, and that was a process because I did have to come off testosterone and obviously boost my levels back. And it took a minute. It was not fun.
Like I said, the 6-year-old guy that I know, I could damn near guarantee if he could take a time capsule back in time, rather than going through what he's going through and the expensive money that he's putting through and the, you know, just the potential like reality that he's not going to give his new wife a child. Like that's super, you know, I bet that's super scary.
And he
for
was
him.
60, he probably thought he was done.
well,
But once again, you got a
yeah.
wild card, you know.
He did. And look, I think we all we go through changes in our lives. People find God later in lives. People find different careers. Maybe they were, you know, adamant about travel or something else happens. And now you're like, okay, I want a family. And now you're in your mid 40s and you made a decision in your 30s to go on testosterone and now you're stuck.
Yeah.
Like it's super easy and relatively inexpensive to preserve that capability to whatever time in your life that you choose to.
Well, and a lot of times, like I said, that's typical recommendation. If we have a guy that, you know, levels aren't changing before they do, if they're younger, they're trying to keep that option open. We usually typically have them go bank some.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you're on testosterone, don't think, oh shit, I can't have kids ever again. No, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that you have a higher risk of not being able to have them had you not done it to begin with. Yeah. So now that you're on testosterone, you definitely should be on a boosting program while you're taking it. So if you take testosterone alone, you're jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. Yeah. Like if you're on testosterone and you're taking enclomiphene along with it, if you're taking HCG along with it, you are preserving with some ability, the ability to have children. You're also preserving your testicles' ability to come back on in the event you need them. I mean, I, again, have no interest in kids. I do take enclomiphene. I don't want my balls completely shrinking up. I like having some natural production when I need it, like if I go to the gym or when I'm wanting testosterone spike to be kind of my own. I just feel better. I feel like your sex drive is up a little bit. I feel like your abilities of all that is
goes
better.
back to like, you have like, I always say you have two types of guys on testosterone. The guy that goes on testes kicked down, but they're still working. And a lot of those guys feel fine. No, those are the guys that still can reproduce or have a kid. They sometimes if you give someone like that enclomiphene or HCG, they don't feel better. But then you have the other side of the spectrum where it's like me, like I'm on test. If I don't take anything with it, my boys kind of like sayonara, we're not going to work. They atrophy up, they ache. And I've had a vasectomy. I'm not trying to have any more kids, but I do feel like having some rhythmic, like testicular function, I feel more homeostatic with my testosterone.
Yeah. So TRT doesn't help with like free testosterone or anything, does it? Or does
Well,
it
it
help
does
reduce
because
it?
you're taking such a significantly higher amount through an injection than you would ever produce naturally. So like that's kind of the reality of being on natural versus boosting versus on testosterone replacement. You know, when we do testosterone replacement, my absolute lowest point of my week is going to be somebody who's on boosting therapy's absolute highest point. So
But it's still different.
but it's still different, like because you also, you know, your natural production is going to be a little bit more blocked because of the volume and the extent of how quickly it's produced. So, you know, guys always say like, oh, well, I'm not experiencing much muscle mass growth, or like me, even when I took the Kaiser trucks, we were sitting here talking about that. I lost a lot of muscle mass and a lot of strength and a lot of size because I just didn't have that consistently high exposure to higher testosterone. And I don't take a lot of testosterone.
More free. Like
and the
significantly,
androgen exposure. So there is a big difference between how effective TBT versus TRT is as far as all the symptoms. But if it's nothing versus something, like if you're in the position where you're not ready to make that commitment, you want to have children, whatever the reason is, boosting, yes, do that hands down. But I'll tell anybody who's on boosting, you haven't really experienced testosterone until you go on to testosterone replacement.
Yeah.
You've put your foot in the water, but you sure as shit ain't jumped in.
Yeah, but if you take someone who's low, who truly needs TBT, and they respond to TBT, that's, you know, because they're trying to avoid that for certain reasons, like that's good enough for them.
I mean, I got a client that we just did his blood work, and he's on just enclomiphene. His total level is 1,400.
Jesus.
And he went from like a 400 to 1,400, like super high. And his free level was like a 20 or 21. So I mean, he's rocking. That guy, like, keep it going. Do not go on testosterone replacement. But that's very
abnormal
atypical.
situation.
Yeah.
And so, look, we touch in the other testosterone replacement episodes about the different types of it. Just quickly, if people want more in depth, go to those other episodes on testosterone. But pellets, topical, and injection, just lightly touching. You guys are pretty not against, but you know, topical and pellets don't really work compared to.
They work. They just come with a lot of bullshit, you know.
Yeah.
And so injectables is what we promote at the clinics, hands down. You get a very low aromatase conversion. You get a very low dihydrotestosterone conversion comparably. You can time it a lot more so because, you know, you're putting it directly into the bloodstream. You're not relying on it going through the kidneys and liver or going through the transdermal system. You know, the pellets don't have to be surgically implanted. You're not dealing with as high of a trough or as high as a peak or low of a trough. You're not getting that excessive conversion to estradiol due to its presence for a long period of time. You're not getting this high conversion to dihydrotestosterone, which is one of the problems with topical. Topical, through the transdermal layers, transitions to DHT quite quickly, which has a very high factor of risk when it comes to prostate enlargement, hair loss, and cardiovascular disease.
all the stuff you don't
The
want.
problem, which is so ironic when you talk to like a general practitioner who doesn't know anything about testosterone, they're totally fine prescribing a topical testosterone to a patient, but they're not okay prescribing an injectable because their association is injectable is like steroids. Meanwhile, what they're ready to prescribe somebody in a topical version has all the major health problems
all this stuff.
from testosterone use, and injectable has the lowest risk when it comes
not
to
to
it.
mention, you get a mediocre level. I've yet to this day, I think I maybe seen like 2 or 3 come through the door that had a decent.
Yeah, then you talk about these guys rubbing the shit on their balls, and it's like,
Just grow some extra hair.
yeah,
on
I don't even
testicles.
understand that principle, and maybe I'm just, I think it's
Is it
because
like the same sort of science like sunning your balls? Like
no,
there's not
it's
really
because they
science
say
behind
like
it?
the receptor sites for testosterone are the most abundant in your testes, which of course makes sense because that's where it's made, and that the blood vessels there can like receive it and take it. But like, I don't know why wouldn't you just put a little, like, I guess in my mind I would say, well, just put a little bit more like on your shoulder where where it's absorbing anyway. I don't know if I would slather this like sticky nasty gel on my balls and then
Just
walk
use it as a
around
lube,
my
maybe.
legs sticking, my balls sticking in my leg, but. Yeah, so topicals just like no, not in our wheelhouse. Pellets pellets are good for like an old, a senior citizen guy who doesn't have the desire to take the injections because of low muscle mass and still has higher, risk associated with topical, or maybe topical didn't work. Pellets, you're putting something in your body for 4 months and you assume that it's going to be timed and absorbed evenly through the process, which it absolutely does not. You get this really high peak at the beginning and a really low trough at the beginning or at the end. So you only have this sweet spot in the middle. So for kind of like 2/3 of the time, you're either overdosed or underdosed.
Well, too, it all obviously with pellets now too. A lot of people use the compounded ones, which
they're
there's no
sketchy.
guarantee and like release rate. Yeah, it's
Just pellets, no.
Yeah.
Don't do them.
And that's to
And then the last version is the oral, which is Kaisertrex, which is a really interesting, cool way to experience testosterone beyond boosting. So kind of think about boosting as like category 1 and injectable is category 2, where oral Kaisertrex is like 1.5. It's somewhere in between. It has not the risks associated with like infertility and the aromatization problems because it's only present in the body for a short period of time. So that consistent exposure that your body like is sensing the presence of testosterone, it's only there for like half the day. And then in the evening and afternoon, it's gone. So then the ball's like, oh shit, I'm back to work. It looks like.
Yeah.
So you're giving your testes kind of like a break for like half the day. But then they got to get back to work in the afternoon. That oftentimes what we do is we partner the Kaisertrex with enclomiphene, because like if your levels were low enough to need the Kaisertrex to begin with, then theoretically, if you boost your testicles to produce more of their own testosterone when the Kaisertrex, which is the oral testosterone, tapers off in the afternoon, you then have this higher natural production to balance out the high and low. So it is a cool way to do it. Again, not as dramatically impactful as an injection, but more so impactful than the boosting is. It's expensive. It comes with its own levels of, kind of keeping up with it, the pills and the problems. But, again, if you're willing to do it, you don't like the shots, you're not ready for the infertility commitment.
It's like a test drive for
It is a test drive, yeah.
Yeah, because for people listening, we do have actually 2 episodes on Kaisertrex. There's one where you and I, Alex, were going over it, but then you actually then tried it for 60 days and gave your honest review. So if you guys want to listen to that one, that's also on Spotify, wherever you're listening or watching this on YouTube as well. So if you want to go more into that, it's better to listen to those ones. And Alex gave a very honest and brutal opinion based on if you already taking TRT.
For me.
For you. Yeah. If you're already
and
taking
I did it as well. I actually ran it.
And you're the same sort of feeling as Alex?
It's hard because you're optimized. Once you get yourself
We're used to
balancing.
eating filet mignon.
So like, it is like, Kobe beef.
Right. Like we're Kobe beef in the world. We're like optimized to the perfect level. And then we're kind of like,
it's
then we're
when you
given like a
dial it
shitty
in like
steak.
that, it's hard because, and how you respond and the dosing of it, how it goes through the lymphatic pathway. Do I think it's a great, safe alternative to like figure out, like if you have someone who has some issues and you want to kind of test it out, make sure things don't move, prostate issues, hair loss. It's a great test drive.
Hey guys, so just quickly, we've noticed a lot of you commenting that you're not sure where you can go to get trusted and safe peptides, semaglutide, tirzepatide, testosterone replacement therapy, or testosterone boosting therapy. And we wanted to just make mention that T Clinics USA is one of those places. Now, Alex and Jeff, who you see in this podcast frequently, they're probably in this podcast right now with me, they are from T Clinics USA. And as they've shown in episode after episode, details is what matters. So just because you may want something or think you need something, they are going to make sure that you are getting the thing that is right for the goal that you have. And what's better is they offer a 10% introduction discount to anyone who is listening to the ManLab. So that is you. So if you wanted to make use of that, get peptides or testosterone from a place that you can trust that have your goals in mind and want to show you the right way to get there, go to tclinicsusa.com, mention the ManLab for 10% off your first package, and you can even ask Alex or Jeff directly any questions you may or may not have, which is kind of cool. So just again, tclinicsusa.com. If you don't want to remember that, the link is in the description of wherever you are listening or watching this podcast. Mention the ManLab in the contact form and you will receive 10% off your first package. Now let's get back to the show.
There's two formats of hypogonadism, which is the kind of clinical definition of having low testosterone. You have primary and secondary. So the difference is a fault in the brain's ability to tell the testicles to do their job, or is the fault in the testicles' ability to do their job. Some guys truly have balls that basically don't work. And whether it be from radiation, cancer treatments, injuries, like if you get kicked in your balls really hard or some kind of a major injury, your testicles truly could be broken. And so even though your brain's trying to tell them, hey, do your job, so in those incidences, no matter how much, boosting you give, there ain't nothing to boost. The balls are broken. It's essentially like they're castrated to a point. They may have damaged testicles or truly may not have them at all. Like guys that potentially have to have their testes removed due to testicular cancer or some kind of a tumor or something injury happens. And so like you can't boost something that either doesn't exist or that is completely broken. So part of that blood test,
that'd suck.
So part of that blood test when we do it, when we do like a blood test, if you get a guy whose total level is 200 and his LH is like in the high 70 to 80 percentile, then chances are he has a fault in the testicles, not a fault in the signal.
Okay. And so to wrap this all up, dosage. I know everyone's always asking in comments about proper dosage for enclomiphene, like for boosting. Is there a recommended dosage or is there a dosage protocol to look into?
Yeah, I mean, the enclomiphene pills that we have available are 12.5 milligrams or 25 milligrams. And so usually it is a little weight dependent. So smaller guys can get away with taking smaller amounts and bigger guys require a little bit larger amounts. And because of the half-life of the drug and you're utilizing it alone and by itself, it's a daily pill. So usually smaller guys can get away with 12.5 milligrams and older guys, or not older, bigger guys, over 200 pounds or so should be kind of going towards the 25 milligram. I would say remember the drug isn't the thing doing the job. So don't think by taking a 25 milligram that you're going to have higher testosterone levels than you would if you took a 12.5. Start with the 12.5s across the board. See how your body reacts, because if you're capable of getting high testosterone 12.5 and then 6 months, 6 years down the road, you start noticing your levels dropping a little bit, you can turn up the amount of product you're using, the volume, if you will, by taking a 25 and maybe kind of reinvigorating some of that experience again. And so it is good to start with a lesser dose. HCG, usually it's like a 500 unit every other day or 3 times a week or 750 twice a week kind of therapy is usually what's recommended. So those are usually like in your boosting ranges. If you're using enclomiphene in combination with testosterone therapy, just to keep them alive, you can take that dose and go every other day just to keep them resurrected. And then something also just to be mindful of is like anti-estrogens, like anastrozole or tamoxifen. You should really consider which of those two are appropriate for you during your boosting therapy. Because anastrozole is a very strong anti-estrogen, but it actually can reduce some of the capabilities of the testosterone from being boosted. So sometimes it's better to choose tamoxifen, which is Nolvadex. It's more expensive, but if you're struggling with like getting the most out of your testosterone boosting program, or you're really in this fertility kind of world where you're trying to be fertile, and you're not getting as much out of it as you hope to, but you're seriously unable to or not wanting to do testosterone therapy, maybe making an adjustment in your aromatase inhibitor would help get more juice out of the squeeze.
Okay, and testosterone replacement therapy, is there a recommended dosage, protocol?
I think we kind of utilize the milligram per lean pound of muscle mass there, kind of mindset. So if you're a 200-pound guy of lean muscle mass, not like you're physically 200, but if you're 220 and you got about 200 pounds of lean muscle on you, 20 pounds of fat, give or take, you're about 200 milligrams is appropriate. But again, like always start with less, because your receptor sites at the beginning are way more susceptible to taking less, and you can always increase down the road.
Sensitive.
So like we start with less. we reassess people's blood works, and then we can always increase
Well,
down
and
the
that's
road.
kind of like where, you pay attention, you could dial somebody in. If you start conservative, you could see like, okay, do they make blood? Do they get polycythemia? Is the prostate moving? It kind of helps you safely vet out the potential issues that could come up. And then you start being in, like, usually by that first lab, we could be a sniper and get people balanced pretty quick.
And it's always easy to go up the ladder than it is down the ladder. If you start somebody too high with too high a dose and they get used to the way they feel and everything's great, hunky-dory, but then we do blood work and like a lot of red blood cell development, PSAs, increase. Man, they don't want to hear we got to turn down how much testosterone you're using. Like they're like, oh shit, I feel good, and then from there it is a little bit of a letdown, right? So I feel like start, a little bit more conservative, maybe 150 milligrams or so, and see how you feel. You may feel like a rock star, And I will say there is a consequence to overexposure of too high a testosterone too. Sometimes, there's a sweet spot in the middle where all of a sudden everything works. And then all of a sudden, like guys will say, man, ever since like increasing my dose, I feel like my sex drive has gone to shit. And like I've started putting on more body fat and my blood pressure's gone up and my workouts are going crap. And it's like, you're just taking too much, you're almost overexposing the receptor sites to testosterone. And now those SHBG levels have crept up behind the window that we didn't know. And now that's blocking the testosterone doing its job and your body's converting more into estrogen. And so don't always think like, you hear these idiots that, go on
because
they go on YouTube and there's some idiot out there talking about like 300 milligrams, 400 milligrams, 3 cc's. Like, you're not a bodybuilder, like you're not trying. Those guys do that for a few months, 2 months. And so of course, like that's okay, but if you're doing this, like what we do it for, which is lifelong therapy, which this is lifelong therapy, you don't want to have to take that much of anything.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say it goes, obviously when you get into aromatase inhibitors or anastrozole, that's like been the wave over the last few years. Be like, oh, you shouldn't have to take one. And a lot of that could be mitigated with dosing.
Yeah.
But, it's
well, just
not,
like Dr. Arsman spoke about in our previous one, how, taking an anti-estrogen has been villainized by so many YouTubers and so many idiots on Instagram.
to look different.
Because they're like trying to say, well, you don't need those because they're dangerous or they cause this problem. And it's like, okay, maybe, but is the consequence of elevated estradiol even more dangerous? Like, is having prostate enlargement more dangerous? Is increasing blood pressure from aromatization issues more dangerous? So there is no right answer that anybody should be hearing me or anybody say on a YouTube channel. You need to do blood work and assess what is right for you. And then you and your practitioner decide how to dial your therapy in. Testosterone therapy, what we prescribe as far as the injectables, man, there's also ways to like change that up. Is it a once a week shot? Is it a twice a week shot? Is it a 3 times a week shot? Because certain people react better to smaller doses. I was talking to a client this morning, matter of fact, who's just saying that, after he takes his shot, for the first 3 days, he's been feeling kind of down and out and depressed and like kind of lackluster. And I'm like, we're going through this whole equation. Like, what could it be? And I'm like, you know what, man? I think what your problem is you're taking too much at once. Like you're flooding your system. You're probably having a high spike of estrogen, which that small amount of aromatase inhibitor you've been used to for the past couple of years maybe isn't enough anymore because maybe you're more sedentary, you're just getting older. Why don't we split your dose in half now and see how you feel in comparison? Now, I don't know if that's the answer, but there are multiple ways to do this and there's no right one answer for any one person. I know it works for me and Jeff knows what works for him. And we can advise people to try certain things, but until you try it yourself and you kind of consider what makes you feel the best for yourself and your personal therapy, like
I wish it was textbook, but it's so not.
it's not.
Yeah,
and this is
so
what
not.
makes this business tough.
Well, and I think that's why we've kind of separated from a lot and get a lot of transfers, just because you have to work with the client. You have to listen to the client. You got to take everything into account and then make the adjustments to, once again, balance it all, not just look to fix one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can't figure out what's wrong with somebody else just because it worked for you.
Yeah. What's the recommended, final question I've got is, how regular should someone be getting their blood work checked for boosting and for replacement?
Usually, I'd say after the first 4 months, 100% for both. for both testosterone boosting and for testosterone replacement. And no sooner, really. Don't do any sooner than 4 months, because you gotta give the body time to react to the presence of whichever of those 2 programs you chose to start.
Unless you don't feel good.
Yeah, but even that,
Yeah.
because you got to give your body a little time to, number one, have the suppression effect of having the presence of the testosterone now to take into effect. You got to give the body the ability to aromatize it if it's going to. You got to have the body the ability to produce the red blood cells if it's going to happen. So usually 4 months, right? And so even on boosting, you'll see what kind of testosterone response they get.
So we'll usually try to get it closer to that 2-3 month mark for TBT. For
TBT,
TRT,
because you're seeing if they're going to respond.
Right.
I don't want to waste your money or time with no result.
But TRT usually by 4 months, no longer than 6. So we can.
And then usually we like to do it every 4 months because
Is that for the first one, or is that ongoing?
Well, for testosterone replacement, every 4 months, so 3 times a year. Mm-hmm. If you've been doing this for a long period of time, can you dial it back to twice a year? I think responsibly, yes, because your body doesn't really change.
History, prostate, blood volume, so a lot of that has to be taken into account. So you could probably go every 6 months.
Yeah, and boosting, every 6, because you're still having those risks that need to be considered, like your prostate issues and your red blood cell development. Even though those risks are a lot less than a guy on testosterone injections, look, like the guy I said who has a 1,400 testosterone level now. Believe me, he's just as vulnerable to side effect issues that a guy who's on injectable could be.
Yeah.
Because that's very, very high. Now, granted, he doesn't have any of his problems, but, not to say he's
not immune from it.
No, he's not,
Yeah. Perfect. Anything else you guys we should cover?
No, I will say this, again, I feel like we always want guys to get the most out of their experience with us. But if you're going to be doing either of these programs and you're going to be going to a clinic like ours, we expect you to be with us for a very long time.
Yeah.
Whatever choice you choose is not permanent. You can always make another choice along the way. But I think taking the conservative route first and always being willing to go a little bit more aggressive after is the smartest way to do it. We do get pushback when guys are pissed off that they're told they can't start testosterone right out the gate. We're not doing it because we're trying to be,
takes X amount.
We're trying to be an asshole. We're trying to do it because look, we want you to be happy with us for years to come. I know you're excited to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
It's a long journey ahead. Let's just take it slowly. Let's walk you to the finish line, and eventually you're going to really have the best experience you can. So I think the message is don't be impatient. Take your time in this. This is a long road ahead, and qualified offices and qualified practitioners and qualified guys like myself and Jeff and the team that works for us, Danny, Wally, Chris, these guys have had so much experience talking to guys just like you that have been through it. And although your experience,
been through it themselves,
then they've been through it. And then although your experience is unique to yourself at this moment, we've seen it. We've seen it through. The doctors that work for us are all great. Dave in Coral Springs and Dr. Vell and Dr. Baza, these guys, we know, what to deal with when it comes to these therapies. That's why you come to us, lean on us for the expertise to kind of guide you in the right direction. You'll get to where you want to get to.
Yeah. Perfect.
So,
all right. Well, thanks guys. Now, just a reminder before we say goodbye, make sure to subscribe, like the video, share it with a friend if they might get some value from this. Also, T-Clinics does offer 10% off your first package. So go to bit.ly/TClinicsUSA, mention the ManLab, 10% off. Link is in the description of wherever you are watching it. And we will see you guys for next episode. Peace.